Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Change Podcast, Insights into Empowerment. And I am your host, Nicole Harvick. And today we have another amazing guest that I cannot wait to dive into his story because it's absolutely amazing. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about him before we start just to give you can't wait to do this type of feeling. He is an author and a keynote speaker. But most notably, he is a cancer survivor. And I think we all know someone who has gone on that journey. I know I do. I know several people. And his story is really, really amazing. So let's welcome Terry Healey. Hi, Terry.
Hi,
How are you this morning?
hi, Nicole. Great. How are you doing?
You know what? I'm doing great, and I can't wait to dive into this because your story is so interesting. Is there a beginning that we can start at and kind of take that travel down that road of how you found out, what path you went to heal it, and where you are now?
Yeah, so I guess it kind of starts if you go to when I was a junior in college at UC Berkeley, and I like to say I was living life on easy street, Nicole, because everything was kind of going along as I had planned in terms of all the milestones that I felt like I wanted to be hitting. Life was good, and then this bump formed behind my right nostril. It prompted me to go see a doctor. I'll be honest, the first doctor visit, he kind of smiled at me and said, "I think it's just a pimple." And so that was something that I knew wasn't right. As at 21, you know what a pimple's like, and I'm like, nah, I don't think so. But followed protocol, eventually got the diagnosis, and I was diagnosed with a really rare form of cancer called
Oh,
a
wow.
fibrosarcoma, which typically does occur in like the 15 to 20-year-old type of age range. But yeah, really rare situation. And then sort of that's where the journey began.
And I'm curious, from the time that you went to that doctor till you finally got diagnosed, how long of a time frame was that?
It was about 8 weeks.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't like you knew your body, you knew something was going on, correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. And so what were the next steps then?
So the next steps were, fortunately, I got referred from that doctor who I wasn't too confident in, to UC San Francisco. I met this great guy, really liked him. We had a good chemistry fit. And when he examined me and studied the history on it, they decided that they could, because they caught it in the early stages, they felt they could remove it with surgery and surgery only. I had the surgery. And then, Nicole, I went back about my life and I thought everything was hunky dory. I was invincible, 21. Life's
Right.
good.
Aren't we all?
Aren't we all? And I looked the same as I had before. And then 6 months later is when I began to feel tingling sensations in my cheek. And it kind of felt
Ooh.
like ants were crawling through my skin. And so I went back to UC San Francisco. And that's when really everything went into acceleration mode. And it was clear that the doctor and the team at UCSF had an urgent situation on their hands. And so the wheels were in motion, and I was scheduled for a pretty major operation right away. And that's what kind of led to everything that happened from there.
Yeah. And you were 21 at the time?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Did you let fear creep in at that point, or was it like it hit you so hard you're like, let's just take care of this?
Well, I'll tell you that the original diagnosis I wasn't that freaked out by, but I was somebody that had a foundation of religious faith that gave me a lot of hope. I relied on that. I had a great support system, Nicole. So I had things in my corner that I felt like I could rely on. But honestly, at 21, and when they gave me a clean bill of health that first time, I thought, oh, I'm good. But yeah, when I ended up at a tumor board in front of 15 doctors and specialists who clearly saw something in their mind that was not that was frightening. I could see it in their eyes. I'll never
Ooh.
forget the images on two of their faces. And so that's really, yeah, I was pretty freaked out. I was in shock more than anything else. And so I went into surgery and had a massive, 11-hour operation that
Oh,
resulted in the removal of half of my nose, the shelf of my right eye, the muscle and the bone from my right cheek, part of my upper lip, part of my hard palate, 6 of my teeth, and I woke up attached to my chest because they had to transplant so much tissue from my chest to fill in this huge cavity that had been created. So when I woke up, that's when it really hit me, Nicole, that man, this is not only life threatening as they told me, but now I'm disfigured and I look like the Elephant Man.
wow. Now, when you went into surgery, did they tell you that any of this might occur?
Yeah, it was a pretty sobering conversation with my surgeon the day, after the tumor board meeting. And so he did warn me that this could be potentially disfiguring. And what I'll never forget him saying was, we might have to remove your right eye.
Oh,
And that I think was more concerning to me than anything. Like, I don't know, losing half my nose seems so less severe than losing my eye. And so when I woke up, it's kind of a story in and of itself, but I woke up to find that I still had my eye. So right away, Nicole, I had gratitude. I was grateful for that.
wow.
They had saved my eye. So I tried to focus on positive energy wherever I could, and sort of discount the fear and uncertainty and all of that, because I kind of always knew, being raised the way I was, that that's not going to get you very far. Try to focus on being positive any way you can.
Wow. And at 21, we have this little vision of life of how it's supposed to go and what we're supposed to be doing and hanging out and doing things. And there you are in a hospital disfigured.
Yep.
That had to be, I mean, I know you said you're glad they didn't take your eye, but that's scary. That's really, really scary. How did you cope with that?
It was, yeah, it was incredibly scary. I had the way I cope with it. I would say, there's many things that I was fortunate to have in my corner. I talked about my faith. I mentioned I had a great support system, but I don't want to discount my doctor. Right? He was this
Mhm.
guy that I mentioned. We had a great chemistry fit, but he was incredibly confident. He was very competent, and I just sort of believed in what he was telling me, which was that he was going to get me cured. I believed that when he told me he was going to get me reconstructed, that was going to happen. And so I think he gave me a tremendous amount of hope. And what I think is important, Nicole, is like, the hope that he gave me was really critical at that stage, right? When you have no idea where life's going to land in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 years for that matter. And so having that hope, despite whatever the final outcome was, made a huge difference in my
Oh,
recovery. I really feel that way.
I believe that too, because you go on in with a certain mindset. You've created your own scenario by his confidence. And I hear stories all the time about, well, I went into the doctor and they gave so and so 6 months to live. Well, guess what? That's gonna pop in their mind, and that's
Yeah.
not working for them. So you were very, very lucky, weren't you, to have that surgeon that had full faith in himself and you.
I was, and I have stayed close to him ever since. And I see him usually every summer. So
Really?
great guy. He lives
That's a
down in
great
LA now.
story. Yeah. I mean, you meet some doctors that you could go to 100 times and they still wouldn't remember your first name. So congratulations for
Yeah,
creating a relationship with this
yeah,
man, you
yeah,
know. And what about, as a mom, I always think about, I've got
yeah.
two girls. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's that like from your end watching your parents go through this with you?
Oh, hard, very
Oh,
difficult, because I had great parents. They were incredibly supportive. They would do anything for me. And to sit there and see the pain in their eyes and yeah, I don't want to say hopelessness, but a few times I kind of felt that way. And the story about my dad, real quick, was after this tumor board meeting where they gave us this horrible news about all the components of my face that might be removed. My dad picked me up at curbside, and he's, when I was leaving the hospital, and I got in the back seat, and I'm going to cry telling you the story, but my dad never cried. I never saw him cry. And he just sat there and he said, "I'm so sorry, Terry." And he just broke down.
Wow.
And, I'd never seen the man cry before. He was so stoic, and it just killed me to see that, they didn't feel they had any control over what was going on. And this was just happening way too fast. So, but I had their support all the way through. So I was lucky for that.
Good, good. I'm glad to hear that. So once you got through with this surgery and your life I'm sure just pivoted,
Yeah.
what took you back into understanding that you might have to create a new life for yourself?
Well, what happened was over time, the story of me getting back and reconstructed seemed to be slowing because it was, oh, we got to let everything heal. Now we got to do radiation therapy. And radiation therapy really complicated things because it really impacts the blood flow kind of permanently. It affects things in a permanent way. And I had a lot of radiation. So as I began to have procedures over time, I realized that maybe I'm taking a couple steps forward, one step back. Sometimes I'm taking two steps back, one step forward. I didn't feel like we were making the progress that any of these surgeons along the way expected. I think they all had grand visions that they were going to get me back because many of them had done these things before. But my
Mhm.
case, as it turned out, Nicole, was incredibly complex because not only did it impact so many different areas of my face, but because I had a huge cavity underlying in my cheek, everything from the radiation and everything else, everything started pulling toward that cavity. So actually the disfigurement got worse. The nose started
Oh,
pulling more to the right. The eyes started drooping more. The lips started pulling up. Everything was contracting. So I, over time, began to really do a lot of introspection and reflection. Reflection became huge for me, and I really tried to pay attention to everything that was happening around me, realizing that this life that I'm leading is is creating a situation where I'm feeling less and less about myself. I don't feel good about myself. My self-esteem is deteriorating. My self-confidence is declining. I could feel it every single day. And so I was just really fortunate that I met somebody that opened my eyes and kind of helped me pivot, to your word, in a new direction, in a new path. It was basically, bottom line was, you can't control the surgical procedures that you're having. What you can control is your inner strength and what's inside of you. And you have to start to rebuild that instead of focusing on rebuilding your face. That was
yes.
the pivot point. Tough, but that's when I really started to figure out new tools and methods to drive myself forward.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because that's what I teach as well, is that everything is inside of you. How
Yeah,
you feel, how you react, how you respond. And everyone's so caught up in the visual, never understanding that, they're someone that's beautiful could be ugly inside, and someone that has a disfigurement can have the most beautiful soul there is. So
absolutely.
congratulations, whoever did that. You know, Big pat on the back, right?
Absolutely.
Good, good. So were you working at the time that all of this happened?
Well, I did have, so I was a senior as this was occurring. I was still trying to graduate from Cal. And I did have a job at a law firm. My original goal was to go to law school. That's what I was planning to do. So my employer was great, but eventually I graduated as I was going through all this stuff. And so, yeah, I did want a career. And so I started working full time for a high tech company. And I give credit to the CEO of that company because I really felt like I was not a very confident guy.
Oh,
And yet he gave me a job and he gave me a chance and he gave me an opportunity to kind of prove myself. And so I think that work became instrumental in my recovery, Nicole, because I was somebody that was fortunate to be very focused and goal oriented. So I was really good about setting goals for myself and realizing that in order for me to go into a meeting and present my business case or my proposal, I had to be buttoned up. I had to be prepared. And so I began this process of almost over preparation, right? Where I wanted to know my material inside and out. And so those kind of things that I started to employ really helped me to start to believe more and more in myself because when you walked out of that meeting, you felt like, you know what? I actually believe that my self confidence is actually starting to improve. I feel good
okay.
about what I just did. So, baby steps.
And that's all you can do. And as you reflect back on that time with that person that gave you that opportunity in presenting, do you think that helped you become a keynote speaker that you are today?
Absolutely, it did. I think somebody believing in you, number one, but that preparation, that practice uh, was always something that I felt like, hey, if I'm ever going to get on a stage, a bigger stage, I have got to know my material. I have got to be confident up there. And so that was really spawned actually in many ways by just writing my first book, which was a memoir. And that was called At Face Value. And I didn't anticipate it, Nicole, but after you write a book, people start to approach you and say, hey, will you come present at our organization, at our company? And I didn't want to turn those opportunities down. So I said, okay, I got to prepare for this. I've got to know my material. I've got to be compelling and engaging. How do I do that? So that was actually very therapeutic in the beginning. Uh, and then over time, I began to realize, hey, if I can make an impact on people, this is the greatest gift. And this is the purpose that falls out of my experience, right?
Yeah, and so often, while we're going through something, we have to wait way down the road before we can look back and say, "Oh, now I get it." That's why, I've had that as well. So when you do speak, what is your topic or are your topics?
So typically, what I speak about is I use my story as a baseline to to help people understand the adversity that I encountered. And then I typically move into what I call my rebar framework, which is I kind of transition into what my survival kit was, which is what I still use to this day. And these are tools that can help people in their personal lives and in their professional lives. And then I move into what I call my rebar framework, which is really a resilience framework that I packaged up to help other people go through the various phases of an adversity and what are the tools and methods that they can employ to get them through. So that's generally the format.
Okay, and what does rebar stand for? I had it written down because I
Yeah.
was curious.
So rebar is, as I said, my resilience framework that represents. It's an acronym that represents four key phases or principles: reflect, build, act, and renew. And so I
Hmm.
could talk briefly about those if you'd like.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So reflect is really what I encourage everybody to start practicing on a daily basis, right? It doesn't matter when you do it. You can do it first thing in the morning. Ideally, you do it in the morning and in the evening, but find 5 to 10 minutes a day to reflect. What do I mean by that? It means that you find a quiet place to reflect. It can be on a walk too, but you start with gratitude. Think about all the things you're grateful for because there's always a million things to be grateful for. That puts you in a positive mindset right away because you start to realize that, hey, my life isn't that bad. And then the idea of reflection from there is you kind of do an audit of your day and think about what you might have learned during the course of the day. Were you inspired by anything? If you were inspired by something, is there something that you can put into practice tomorrow? And the idea of getting into the practice of reflection is you're not going to find an inspiration every single day. But if you're in the practice of doing it, you start to pick up on things, conversations that you had, because you and I will have so many conversations every day. We forget what we talk to people about. We forget that, oh yeah, I met with that gal the other day. So that's
Guilty.
kind of, yeah, right.
Guilty.
We all are. And then as you move into build is really about that time when you start to develop a positive mindset. It's when you develop a growth mindset. So that's when you start to figure out, how am I going to balance my life out? How am I going to build my support system? And how am I going to focus on positivity? What are the tools and methods I'm going to use? Because when you start to do that, it makes navigating your roadblocks or your challenges much easier when you do it with confidence and optimism instead of fear and uncertainty. As you move into act is really where the rubber meets the road. So this is when you start to truly face your challenges. It's when you start to take control, and it's when you get focused and set goals. So this is execution mode. This is probably the biggest body of the work within Rebar, because there's so many methods people can choose from. It's not one size fits all. And then finally, renew is really that point at which you make a commitment to the process. You step back and you think, hey, I survived that adversity. I'm still here. What did I learn from that? What did I learn about myself? Celebrate your wins. That's really important. And then recognize the traits and characteristics that you embody that helped you get through that ordeal, because that helps rebuild who you are, rebuild your confidence. And so the idea, Nicole, bottom line is that's really about becoming a better version of yourself every day. So that's kind of at a very high level what the process is.
That's amazing. And even if you don't like to admit it, if you wake up, your first breath should be something that you reflect on, because you're here, you're still here.
Right.
For at least another day. So I love that. Now, is that a course that you sell, or is that in a book? How does someone acquaint themselves with it?
Yeah, no, it's not a course at this point. It's my book that I just released last month called The Resilience Mindset. And in this section of the book where I talk about the framework, it's sprinkled with questions for the reader. So the idea is that you answer questions specific to your own situation so that you can personalize the process to your own journey and take away something actionable. I had somebody write me the other day that said, I read your book and I wrote so many notes in it, and I wanted to tear out pages. So now I need another copy because I've torn pages out to remind myself of what to do.
Oh my gosh. You need a journal to go with it.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. But what a compliment for you.
Yeah.
And one of the things I always say with my work, it's like, if I can help one person,
Yep.
one person, 1,000 people, that one person is every bit as important as the others. So that's amazing. So in looking back, you've gone, gosh, what a journey you've taken. And from that 21-year-old boy to you and I speaking today, who are you today as you look back?
Yeah, I'm somebody that's grateful for my experience. I have gained life perspective that I probably wouldn't have gained. And I would say, Nicole, I'm a more empathetic person. And I think that's another gift that comes out of major adversity, is that you become more empathetic of others. And so to your point, if I can help somebody every day or help one person when I give a presentation, then that's victory. And so I think purpose came out of it, and my life is more fulfilling and rewarding as a result.
Wow. That's awesome. That's so awesome. Now we're getting close to the end, but I would like for you to give our audience some nuggets on how to remain resilient, how to remain positive, and how to know there's a purpose for everything.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say that we all do have the capacity to build resilience, right? We all do learn to adapt, we recover from setbacks, and we actually do grow stronger from our experience. And I run into this conversation a lot where some people think, well, you either have it or you don't. I don't agree with that at all. So you can build it. You just have to practice these things that I talk about, right? And I think that I hate to beat a dead horse, Nicole, but I go back to gratitude because I truly believe that when you start there with reflection, that's really what puts you into a positive mindset. And I think the main thing is for people to always remember is that we choose our attitude, right? We choose our attitude. We
Mhm.
choose if we want to be positive or if we want to have negative self talk. It's really easy to think about how bad things can be, but it's not that hard actually to think of the inverse of whatever you might be thinking of that's negative. Um, if you think, it'll never work, for example, like this will never work, I can never accomplish that. It's like, well, step back, reflect, maybe try a different approach. I mean, there's always a different way to look at things in a positive light. And I really do think that people can recover from anything and have a more fulfilling life as a result.
I couldn't agree with you more. And just as an example, that you either have it or you don't. If you would have told me 10 years ago that I would be doing a podcast, that I would be speaking to people, there's no way. No, there's no way. I'm in
Really?
real estate. That's what I do, and
Yeah.
and so you not only can you change, you should be changing all the time. Don't be that same person. That makes you stagnant.
Right.
So those are great nuggets for everyone. So thank you for doing that. That's really, really important. And you've got such a great demeanor about you, constant smile, constant smile. So
Well,
thank
I'm
you
I'm
for
great. I'm thankful for my experience and where I came out. So thank you
wonderful.
for that.
Well, as we get to the end, I would like to tell our audience that I have several links that you can find Terry at. And I think if someone could prop you up and make you feel hopeful, this is the guy to reach out to. So thank you so much for being on today. I really appreciate it. It's an amazing story. And thank you for telling it on the podcast.
Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate you having me as a guest.
You're very, very
Have a
welcome.
wonderful day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.